David. Y'all keep doing something. Welcome to Tanakh Talk. I am your host, William Hall, broadcasting live out of Kingsland, Texas, USA, with episode number 32, not 31, of Rabbi Chaim Coffman's Controversial Issues. Tonight we're talking about predestination, and does God know everything? So Rabbi, welcome back to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here, as usual. At least no complaints on my end so far. Okay, I can't find my knob.
Not yet. I haven't even said anything yet. Just give me a chance to offend some people.
That's funny. I couldn't find my knob. I've got it real dark in here today. No green screen, no bells and whistles, just because. Still pushing through, man, and all these bright lights. That bright light right there in front of my screen right now is like killing my eyes. Anyway, it's better to be in here like it is right now. So. Besides, you with your bright face, it's going to illuminate the whole rest of the show anyway.
I don't even need light. I can just either tick people off or light them up. It's just one or the other. We don't, we don't hold anything back over here.
Right. That's funny. That's funny. Okay, so the first time I heard about this idea of predestination, there was a guy teaching on it, and this was back in I think 1995 or so. And he brought up some really interesting points. In fact, it was a local preacher here years ago, and not here in Kingsland, but within about an hour and a half from here. And he said something really ironic. That's funny. His name was Ron, by the way. That wasn't intended. No pun intended there. Ron and Ray. Yeah. Anyway, he said. This
is not practiced. We just do this for fun.
This is totally just for fun. Yeah. He said there was over 2,000 verse references in the entire Bible where it either says blatantly or implies or to some degree suggests that God didn't know, he had no idea. And then he went over to discuss all these things. And anyway, but I don't even think his point was predestination. I think it was something else, and I can't remember what it was exactly. But I think what it was is this is one of the holiness preachers. He's like, one thing I've learned about Christianity is, you go to some churches, and not that most of you want to hear this, but some churches you go to, and they're like, bring everything's cool with us, drugs, sex, rock and roll. Just take Jesus with you when you go. And it's like the other
Don't leave home without Bob. Here he is.
Yeah.
Don't leave home without him.
And then you have those fire and brimstone type preachers that it's like, that they really do try to live moral. That's the only way I can say is moral, because they don't follow the commandments because they don't know what the commandments are most of the time. But they do try to raise their kids morally, and they try to well, they don't try it. They force it. They're just like fire and brimstone, And then you got the ones that's kind of in between. And this guy was kind of in between. He's never been really loose. But anyway, make a long story short, that's too much information so far. What he was trying to get a message off, because it was a real small community at the time, and it's like all the families knew each other, and so he had a lot of insight that a lot of the teenagers around didn't know about, And so they would come to church acting like everything's cool, and I guess he thought it would be a good time to touch base, to kind of say, hey, you're going to be held accountable for your sins. And so you think God knows the sins you're going to commit tomorrow? He goes, I don't think so. And it just like jaw dropped the entire building. Was like, what do you mean he doesn't know what's going to happen tomorrow? And then he went on this thing, and everything he said, even now I'm thinking back, man, it's still pretty spot on, I don't have a problem with it either way, because the biggest argument I had, somebody had with me, was they said, are you telling me that God is he is so lacking in his power that he cannot control the future? And I said, that coin flips over to the other side. Are you telling me God is so lacking in power that he is controlled by the future? Think about it.
Right.
So anyway, that's kind of where...
There's been a question that people have been wondering about for thousands of years. Can God make a rock so big he can't throw it? What's the answer?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, right. That's
Like,
funny.
I don't know what they've been discussing for 2,000 years. Like, is it so big? It's not so big,
Yeah.
but can God actually do something that is limited by? No.
Right. Now, let me ask you a question on that, okay?
Yeah.
This is controversial issues, just letting everybody know. So, God won't force his will on me. So he made me, but he's not going to impose his will on me. So he can't throw me if I don't want to be thrown. So in that regard, in fact, that very question I heard around the same time frame, this exact same question verbatim. Can God make a rock so big that he can't throw it? And then the guy teaching this whole mini sermon was, yes, he can. And he goes, it's your heart. Your heart is that stone. And he goes, you have to be willing. And so it's metaphorical, and it does make sense because, I mean, God won't force you to do something unless it's something that has to happen, like in Ezra, or something like that.
The only time in history that we know of that God forced somebody's hand
was...
Right? In that time in history, that is with who? With Pharaoh himself.
Gotcha.
Right? It says that God hardened his heart. So the commentaries ask, the Rambam speaks about it in the Laws of Repentance, that if Pharaoh had his heart hardened, why is he punished? He's got no free will.
Right.
God took away his free will. Now so we can come back to that, but in general, I think that's a good I think it's a good segue, because when we look at a person's free will, right? Let's analyze for a second, how much free will do we really have? You're going to say, what do you mean? I could just shut you off right now.
Right.
I don't have to listen to you, you big mouth, and you're this and you're that. Like, I could just shut you down. You could, right? A person can walk away, they can go eat a ham sandwich, they can, people can do whatever they want, right? The thing is, now keep in mind, we'll go a little bit deeper. God, when he puts a soul into the body, right? You go back to the book of Genesis, God breathed in the soul of a human, right, of Adam, right? He gave him the soul. The soul is what controls the body. If you look at the soul itself, the soul is pre-programmed spiritual DNA.
Mm-hmm.
It's most likely the soul's already been here, right? But let's say the soul comes for the first time. God sends it on as, sends it to do whatever it's supposed to do. Now the soul doesn't ever know what it's doing here, right? We spoke about the soul and reincarnation. We mentioned probably, and again, I don't want to be misquoted on this, but if, person should try and figure out what the most difficult thing in the world for them to do, right? They would rather eat glass or take glass and rip their body to shreds. So we'll give an example. We'll go back some years, and we'll go back to Mr. Arthur Fonzarelli, right? You go back to Happy Days. What was the most difficult thing for the Fonz to say? If anyone remembers, that's right? You can never say I'm sorry.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, that was something that he could never do. Now, I might say, okay, this is a little bit jump going from Kabbalah to to Happy Days, but at the same time, if that was he would rather slit his wrists and his eyeballs and everything else and not want to do that. Now, that is probably a good indication of what he's doing here in this world. Now, he may never know that, right? A person may never know what they're doing here. Doesn't matter. God sends the soul to do whatever it's supposed to fix up, whatever it's supposed to do in this world. Now, when that soul, there are three people that create a child. Now I can do it just with one, but you have a father, a mother, right, and God Himself. God's the one who puts the soul into the body. So that being the case, God is sending this soul into that body, right, to those parents. He's going to have those siblings. Right, all these other different factors are involved. Does that soul have a say?
Right.
No. The soul has absolutely zero say. Not only that, the soul doesn't want to come here. God has to manipulate, so to speak, the soul because he's basking in the soul world. He's basking in God's glory, right? What idiot if you're basking in God's glory? Why would you want to come to this world, right? With this world of temptation and everything else, nobody would want to do that. So what happens? God puts the soul into the body. Now, when God puts the soul into the body, he's giving it a message. And he wants his soul to do whatever it's supposed to do. That soul had no free choice. That soul, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos in Ethics of Our Fathers says that a person's born against their will, they die against their will. So in my language, in parentheses, but you still got to live, right? You have no control when you're going to be in this world. You have no control when you're going to leave, right? When you're going to leave this world. So that being the case, a person's given certain parents, certain siblings, certain socioeconomic, situation, which, is bound to change. It'll go up, it'll go down, or it'll stay down for a long time, or, whatever the case is. So in that sense, just when a person's born, there's no free will at all.
Right.
Zero. The question's going to be, what is this person going to do? How are they going to react? Now, I've heard this from a number of people, and let's take a worst-case scenario. You take a worst-case scenario, somebody's born into a bad family, an abusive family. Let's say the kid himself gets abused. God forbid, terrible things happen. And what happens? Let's say the person doesn't get help. In their entire life, they end up doing different things because of how they were brought up, and what happened to them. Now, tragically, that does happen, right? People, go through tragic situations. They find it very difficult to get out of. At the same time, someone's going to say, well, why did I have to go through this? So what would my answer be? My answer would be, most people know me will say, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know why you had to go through it. But the thing is, God knows, what your purpose is, and there are other things going on that you had to go through. Right now, we're not going to understand that. We're not going to understand it till after we're no longer, the soul's no longer in the body. But there are things that can happen to a person. In general, don't forget the 615th commandments. Don't be a moron, right? You could do certain things that you end up making the mistake. God's going to say, what do you want from me? I didn't tell you to do that. But there are many, many things, many situations a person's put in, and it's not necessarily because of their own doing.
Yeah.
In other words, there's a reaction for what they do. There's a positive reaction. There's a negative reaction. There's physical, there's spiritual repercussions, of what people do. But the reality is, when we come into this world and we're living and we're growing up and we have these different experiences, a lot of that have nothing to do with us.
Okay, let me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, because this is a topic we could dissect and probably talk about for long periods of time on individual pieces, but I want to cover a lot of territory. What about other areas of reference? And I'll give you a couple reference points before you comment on it. In Ezra 1:1, it says that God stirred up the spirit of King Cyrus. And then you have King David where it says, different areas. It says, one says that God stirred up him to take a census. The other one says Satan did it. But either way, it's like you have episodes like this. Then you have Genesis 18 on a different note, not talking about forcing someone to do something, but where it has actually a double implication in the text of Sodom and Gomorrah, where it says, I don't know if I've got a screen pulled up yet. No, I don't. I'll just leave it alone. Anyway, Genesis 18. I'll just try to read off the screen. I think it's 18:1. Let me just go there real fast.
Put on your 3D glasses. Come on.
I know, right? Let's see.
If you can read this, you don't need glasses, right?
Yeah, I don't know what verse it is though. Let's see. Anyway, it says God. Basically, it's the area where it says God heard the outcry and said,
right.
And He said, "I will go down myself to see whether or not these claims against them are true." And
right. So what? Yeah. So what's the question?
The double implication is not only in that verse. If someone was to read that, they'd never read the Bible before, and they picked that up.
Right.
All they heard that God knew everything, but then they read this, it would confuse them.
Go back to Genesis when God created man. What does He say? God, let us make man in our own image. What do
Right.
you mean, our own image? Who's he
Right.
talking to? All
Right.
three of them? Me, myself, and I? Who's he talking to?
Yeah. Right.
Right? So it's a similar, on that, it's a similar
Well, let
idea.
me point the implications out first, and then I'll turn it over to
Okay,
you real
sorry,
quick.
go ahead.
That's
Okay, go
that's
ahead.
okay. So the first implication is, number one, that he didn't know what was going on, and number two, he couldn't see it from up where he was at. He had to go down and see it with his own eyes.
Uh-huh.
So it doesn't it implies, of course, obviously taken out of context. I know that's probably the answer, but the idea is from someone who doesn't know these things, is
Right.
that God doesn't have, number one, he's not all knowing, and he's not omniscient either. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's kind of okay.
Right.
So anyway, take it away.
Survey says. Okay. Wait, so we'll look at the first case
Okay.
where creation of man. Right. Rashi there. Others say similar thing. Who is God talking to? Right. God's talking to his heavenly court. Why? Why is God talking to his heavenly court? He's showing his humility before he creates man. There's a whole discussion. It's a good thing. Is it a good thing or not a good thing to create man? Why? Because man's not going to keep the Torah the way they should. Right, which is a good point. So the whole discussion, Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai, right, the house of Hillel, the house of Shammai, go back and forth and back and forth. It's a good thing man's created. It's not a good thing. It is a good thing. It's not a good thing. Finally, they say it wasn't a good thing man was created, but the fact that man is created, right, you have to look into your actions. You have to fix up your actions, etc. So one aspect of this is that, as Rashi there says, well, someone wants to be a heretic. If they want to be a heretic, they can say, look, it says, let us make man in our own image. There must be more than one God. Right? So Rashi says, okay, so people will make a mistake. But why would the Torah set up that way? Why would the Torah be set up, for failure? Now the reality is that when God creates the world, does he need his heavenly court when he creates man, does he need to have a discussion with anybody less than him? No. Right? Does it need the angels? Does it need the sun and the moon? Come on, it's last week of football. Come on, sun, the moon, everyone get in the huddle, right? Everyone's sitting there huddle, it's like, okay, you're the glass bottle. You go, you run down, take a right. He doesn't care. He's not going to care what they say, right? Why is he taking even into account what they say? Is because he's showing humility. One aspect is showing humility. The second aspect is that people can make a mistake and say there's more than one creator. So now when you get to Genesis chapter 18 and you speak about Sodom, God says, let's see what's going on down there, right? So that's the obvious question. Does God not know what's going on? Of course he knows what's going on. But it may look like if he's going to destroy them and he's going to destroy the whole place, that he should actually show the spiritual world. He's not just going to act on his own whim. He's going to go down and see. Does he need to go down and see? First of all, he says, let us. He doesn't say himself. It's him in his heavenly court. Let's investigate. Right? So again, the heretics could say, see, there's more than one God. Again, if he's showing true judgment, so he's going beyond what he has to do. Does he have to sit there with this kangaroo court? With all no offense to all the angels I probably offended, but do you need this court that God has all these angels around him, having this whole discussion? He doesn't need them. He can make his own decisions, right? He's showing that this is how bad it is, because there will be the other side, and he'll say, well, you should have compassion. You shouldn't wipe them out. Comes along Abraham, right? And God speaks to Abraham, and he says, well, I can't destroy Sodom, before I tell Abraham what's going on. And then there's a whole discussion between Abraham and God about, if there are 50 righteous people, 40 righteous people, etc. So a lot of it has to do with, with God's, with God's humility, because when it speaks in the plural, again, he doesn't need anybody, right? If someone wants to make the mistake and say, oh, look, there must be more than one God. See, for the Christians, this is a major problem, right? For the Christians, where evil is its own creation, then what do? because it doesn't fit your world outlook, you change the translation. Or you mistranslate, because once you mistranslate, if it doesn't fit my world outlook, how can you say, as Isaiah says in chapter 45, how can you say that both good and evil come from God? That's a contradiction in terms, right? If God is all good, how can there be evil? Right? And that's a whole discussion about suffering and where suffering comes from. But what do they say? They say it's not its own entity. So if we were all Zoroastrians today, I don't know how many there are in the world, right? They believe there's a good God and there's a bad God. Right? So if there's a good God, he does good things. If there's a bad God, blame it on his alter ego. Blame it on Batman gets drunk. I mean, whatever. You blame it on, whatever it is. But, those two things can exist within God himself. It's not a contradiction, different aspects of him. The question is, why God would want evil in the world in the first place. That's a whole, the whole hot topic.
Right,
the whole hot
right.
topic in and of itself.
Okay, so let's focus this in on the main, all the stuff I brought up forward, and kind of connect the dots now with the predestination about God knowing the future. Does God know every sin I'm ever going to commit? Does he? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Does he? It's one thing to know evering that you've done.
He's been looking and checking and seeing if you've been naughty or nice. Like,
that's funny. That thought had crossed my mind. But it's one thing to say it's easy for it's simple, not easy, but simple to say that of course every single thing from the past, it happened already, so it's knowable. And I've heard that that God does not exist in time, yet everything about him is time related and very time oriented. And so the idea is, why would someone suggest that God would work outside of time whenever there's no evidence of it in Torah at all? Why is it that
questions like that I can't answer? I mean, people have stupid questions.
I actually thought that was a great question. I really did, because I was thinking that's a good point. I mean, it's one thing to say, well, God works outside time, or like the New Testament people would say, well, you just got to trust God. You just got to believe Him. Forget what the other stuff. Some things just don't make sense. You just got to trust and believe. To me, it all falls in the same category. It can either be explained or it can't. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So predestination is.
I'll give you the fall. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I'll just give you this last buffer. So predestination, are there anybody predestined to go to hell or heaven?
All right, so I'm going to age myself a little bit. Some of the listeners may actually understand this parable. When I was growing up, in the age of the dinosaurs, when I was growing up, there were no such thing as PowerPoint presentations.
Okay.
When I was growing up, they had what they call a film strip. What's a film strip? Film strip, there was a slide, right? There was a strip of film. You put it in a projector. Projector's on the wall, and you have some goofy guy narrating, right? And it gives an introduction. Then all of a sudden you hear ding. What do? You turn the next slide, right? Then he gives a little more introduction. Goes further. You see these goofy pictures. Ding. Next slide. Ding! Next slide, right? Till you get to the end. Now, again, this is a little bit of a jump to Torah and all this, but imagine you have the beginning, you have the middle, and you have the end of this film strip, right? The narrator knows 100% what's going to be at the beginning, what's in the middle, and what's in the end, right? So we can make a jump over here. Right? If God is at the beginning, right? Go back to Genesis chapter 1, verse 1.
Interjection.
That in the beginning of creation, there was the heaven. God created, in God's created the heaven and the earth. What was before that? Well, there was God.
The only problem with that, there's only one problem with that, though. The film strip, in your example, the film strip has already been shot. The entire thing already happened.
Yeah, but there's others. All right, so I'll get to that. So in the beginning, right, of God creating the heaven and the earth, right? So you have, what was God doing before that? So the Medrash says, busy, building worlds, destroying worlds, whatever, but God was there. So in the beginning, God saw all future, right? Everything's laid out, it just hasn't happened yet. But everything's there. Now, when God set up the world the first time, what was supposed to happen? He created man, put him in the Garden of Eden, gave him one command. He said, don't watch Tanakh. No. The command was, don't eat from the tree of knowledge. Right? What did he do? He ate from the tree of knowledge. What happened at that point? At that point, history changed. Why did history change? Because now that man had sinned, they had gone from their lofty position where they were, and now they get knocked down. They have to go through this thing called death. Now, I said this to many secular Jews, and they're totally shocked. I go, do you know Judaism doesn't believe in death? Like, what are you talking about? Like, what do you mean? Of course Judaism believes in death. I said, no. Judaism only believes in death because Adam and Eve ate from the tree.
Right.
Had Adam and Eve not eaten from the tree, what would have happened? That would have been the end of the world. They would have done what they were supposed to do, right? God would have brought them into the Garden of Eden, and that's it. So why does God throw them out? Throw them out of the Garden of Eden because you have the tree of knowledge, you have the tree of life. If they have the tree of life and they eat from the tree of life, fame, right? I'm gonna live forever, right? They can't live forever because they brought death to the world. Now, when they brought death to the world, is that what God wanted? No. Did he understand that man could do that? Yes. Did he put in creation a system where if man doesn't do what he's supposed to do, what God wants him to do, are there going to be repercussions? This changed the entire world, right? We've spoken before. The fact when a person dies, according to Kabbalah, the first person they see is the first man. And they see Adam and they say, because of you, I have to go through this process. Part of his healing process is he has to nod and you go, hopefully, to the right place wherever a person's going to go. But, God knew what was going to happen, right? So why is man punished? Right? That gets to the heart of the question. Man should never have been punished. Right? He's just acting on what God wanted him to do. But is he a robot? God's got plenty of robots, right? They're called angels. They're called animals, right? They're programmed DNA. They can't go outside their own, what they're programmed to do. So mankind is the only being that has a spiritual side and has a physical side, right? That can make decisions. When God breathed in the breath of life, he gave them the ability to speak. Just like animals speak, we just don't understand them. We're not, Dr. Doolittle, but we have the ability to speak and make decisions. We can make good decisions. We can make wrong decisions. At the same time, if you want to say that, well, God knew what man was going to do, he shouldn't punish him. Why shouldn't he punish him? He had free will, and so he made a wrong decision. But that wrong decision that he made was unbelievably catastrophic. It changed the whole world. So this is like the beginning of the film strip. God sees everything that's going to happen, but he put into creation the fact that if this happens, and if they veer off to the left or to the right, and I have to change things, he put it in creation. That's why I have to throw them out of the garden. So, so according to predestination, if they were predestined to do that, they don't deserve punishment. No one should ever deserve punishment because whatever I do, I'm predestined to call you, some redneck schnook, and they're gonna say, "Hey, you never said you were gonna do that. You just embarrassed me in public. Why should I? Sorry, I was predestined to say that, and you deserved it. So therefore, why should anyone ever be punished for anything they do? Comes along the Rambam. And the Rambam asks this monumental question, what about Pharaoh? What about Pharaoh? God took away his free will. You don't see that anywhere ever, that someone's free will, is totally taken away. The examples you gave at the beginning, about whether King David did it or it was the Sultan or, whatever, there were different aspects of the evil inclination. It wasn't forced into counting the people. Right? It was a certain inclination he did it, but it was, it's all part of the same thing. It's not like two totally different entities. So it would be very easy, the example I gave where, someone grows up and God forbid they get, they get abused. They say, God, I don't, I can't do anything. I'm terror stricken. I'm this, I'm that. You can never have a claim against me because this is what you set up for me. Now, part of that may be true. There may be payback. It could be any number of things why this soul has to go through what they do. But there's a 617th commandment. That is, don't pass the buck. Passing the buck means you're going to say, oh, poor me. Look what I went through. I came from a broken home. Right? God says, yeah. You know why you came from a broken home? Because that's where I put you. I give another terrible, example. You go back to, to Big Bag, Mike Tyson years ago when he raped somebody and, he got jail time. What happened? They put him on the stand. And they put him on the stand, and they asked him like, what were you doing? He says, well, she was in my room at 3:00 in the morning, and everyone knows I'm an animal. So what did she expect? That got him convicted. That was like the stupidest thing they could have done.
Right.
That got him convicted. So who cares what type of person he is and how he grew up? Did he do something wrong? He did something wrong. Right? It doesn't matter how he grew up. Doesn't matter he lived on the streets. Doesn't matter whatever his parents were or whatever. He made a choice.
Yeah.
A pretty bad choice. He made a choice, right? So in our lives, we could easily say, people go through very, very difficult situations. All right? I'm not making fun of people who've been abused or anything else. People go through very, very difficult situations, right? But at the same time, people also overcome them. Some are easier, some are not. Some could go through lifetime of difficulty and challenges or whatever. But the worst thing anybody can ever do is say, well, this is the way I grew up, and this is the way it is, and this is what I'm going to do. And they make an excuse why they don't have to do anything. Right? And even if this is what their soul had to go through, and this is what God wanted for it, and it was payback and all that, very nice. But I didn't have a say in the matter. Right? Me in this body did not have a say in what was going to happen. Now, some of it I might have done to myself. Others, God is orchestrating everything around. But if he's orchestrating it, it doesn't mean I have to necessarily act on it. That's the difference. We're not robots. We have to take responsibility, certainly for what we do. So if you're looking at the film script, does God know what this person's going to do? Yeah, he knows what he's going to do. Does he want him to, do something negative? No. But he's going to put him in a situation where either he's going to make the right decision, he's going to make the wrong decision. That's what we're doing a lot of time in this world. Now, it could be, there are sometimes we do it to ourselves, right? That's definitely true. But the way God orchestrates things in the world, there are positive effects, there are negative effects, there are, things that Torah wants us to do, doesn't want us to do, etc. There are checks and balances. Right? But within those checks and balances, God gives us the ability to choose one way or the other. He's putting all these things into action exactly how he does it. The whole discussion, according to Kabbalah, he's got these higher angels, and they give it over to lower angels, and they pass it down, and all these things are being done through God's messengers. And they're putting everything into action. So the $1 million question, well, sorry, we're out of time. The $1 million question is, if all this is being orchestrated by God himself, where do I fit in? How in the world do I fit into this picture? And the simple answer is, yeah, God's orchestrating it. He may be putting you in a corner to see what you're going to do, how you're going to react. Does that mean I have free will? 100%. Right? I have free will. Is it unlimited free will? Doesn't look like it's unlimited, right? Because when we're put in different situations, whatever they may be, at the end of the day, we're the ones that have to make the decision. But what people don't realize, I think there are people that do realize this, but what a lot of people don't realize is we are not in control at all. Of anything. There's a story. I'll tell the following story because I think it's a good story. There was a story of an Israeli whose daughter was very, very sick, and she had to go to a specialist. It's like one specialist who could cure her. And this religious father takes his daughter to the specialist, and the specialist says, "Yeah, no problem. I can certainly help you. I'm an expert in this." He looked at all the, he looked at all the information and what was going on, and looked at the X-rays, etc. He says, "Yeah, I can definitely help," and whatever. So, the father said, "That's great." He said, "Bezrat Hashem, you should be able to help," meaning with the help of God. So this is really doctor. What do you mean the help of God? I don't need God over here. I'm the one, right? I'm the one in charge. I'm the one who's doing this. If it's anybody, I'm going to save your daughter's life, not God. So this is really, father was totally taken aback. It says, he says, "I want you to apologize for saying that." He said, "That's heresy. You can't say that. God runs the world." And this doctor was adamant. And the father said, "If you don't take this back," I'm not going to you. And the doctor laughed, and he said, "You don't come to me, your daughter dies. So you don't understand. I'm the only one who can help you in this situation." The doctor said, "God runs the world, not you," and he walked out. And the father and the daughter walk out. So this doctor's like, "All right, this girl will die. Stop. Not my problem."
Right.
So what happens? This doctor, short time later, is at a major convention, right? He's up in front of speaking. In front of doctors, in front of 250, 300, 300 of his colleagues, making this whole presentation. In the middle of making this presentation, what happens? You know what they say? You gotta go. And he had to run out in the middle of his presentation in order to use the facilities. So after he came back and he finished his presentation, he called this guy up, this religious guy, and he says, "I'm really sorry. I didn't mean it. I'd be more than happy, to help your daughter, and, with God's help." So father asked him, he said, "What happened?" He said, "All of a sudden you're changing your tune." He said, "You didn't need God, and all of a sudden everything's with God's help, and this and that." So he says, "Yeah, I was a fool. Here I am with all these degrees and all this knowledge, etc. And I'm saying I'm the one in charge, and I couldn't even control my own bowel movement."
That's funny. Good
So that that totally humbled him. But people think, they live their lives thinking that I'm in control. A person has zero idea what's going to happen tomorrow. I think it's brought down according to the Zohar or to Medrash. A person's allotted a certain number of words in this world. In other words, let's say a person's allotted, 1 billion words, 2 billion, 10 billion, whatever it is. Once that person hits that threshold, that's it. There's a decree. You're only allowed this amount of words, and that's it. So they say, "Oh, very nice. Very, very, very nice story." So there are a number of cases that I've heard where, someone's speaking to somebody, in the middle of the speech, they drop dead of a heart attack.
Huh.
They don't even finish the statement. They're like,
Right.
and that's it. Right? It's a very scary thing. But if there's a decree made on how many words you're going to get, and all things being equal, this is the amount you're going to get, you're not getting one more word. That last word is the last word. Again, do we live our lives like this? We definitely don't. But at the same time, there's so many things totally out of our control that we think, "Oh, we're in control and we're in this." I can think of countless examples, right? Just in everyday life, we have no say in anything. We're just, what did Shakespeare say, right? We're the greatest puppets in this, in this play because we're the ones just acting things out. But the reality is, we're not putting ourselves in the positions to do most of the things. A lot of the things are being orchestrated in other ways. Now, there are certain things I'll just say in my own life, that, God had, for whatever reason, maybe my own choice, to get me out of Israel, to get me to South America, to Chile, which I'll never figure out what in the world I was doing there, right? But at the end of the day, if God has his way, right, there are things that, that can be done. We may have no understanding, why things are being done, etc. But at the end of the day, a lot of things are being pulled not by our own strength, regardless of what we think, right? Because what we see, I mentioned many times, what we see in this world, we have no idea. We have absolutely, zero idea. There are things, we do have somewhat, control over. But, at the end of the day, if you read, if you go through the book Derech Hashem, The Way of God by the Ramchal, by Moshe Chaim Ludato, he spells this out, according to Kabbalah. He sets this out, and shows how the spiritual forces work, how you have spiritual manifestations, of physical acts, and how that works. One example, right? One example, if a woman, God forbid, smokes crack while she's pregnant, the kid comes out deformed. Is it the kid's fault? It's not the kid's fault, right? But there's a reality. If you do this, this will happen. If, a person's with somebody they're not supposed to be with, they have a child, that child's called a mamzer. It's called a bastard child, right? And that child can only marry someone from either that union or a convert. Now, that being the case, that's a spiritual ramification, right? But it's a physical act. So you can have a physical act that has spiritual ramifications, and how these things meet out and how they come about and whatever, that's for the Kabbalists to, to discuss or whatever. But you have a lot of things going on, in this world. Where does it start from? It doesn't start from this world, right? There are many, many spiritual worlds. Everything starts there, and things come down. They trickle down, right, to this world. You get all these forces being, it's kind of like the Matrix in different ways. You get all these forces going all over the place. God sending his messengers here and there and everywhere, and putting people in this situation, that situation, other things, how they're going to react, not. And there are myriad ways, things can happen and things can be orchestrated. I'll give one example. I'll give another example. You take a Jew, you take a secular Jew, marries a non-Jew. Now, normally, two Jews should be married together. They're two halves of one soul, right? They come together. But let's say, for argument's sake, they marry the wrong person. One case scenario, right? One case scenario. Jew marries non-Jew, right? That's forbidden according to the Torah. According to everybody, it's forbidden. Now, what happens? Now there are ramifications. Now they're going to be children that are not going to be born, right, to that Jew and their spouse and their Jewish spouse, whoever that other half of the whole is. So if they're not going to have that children, that means you're going to have other children possibly brought into the world, and each spouse is going to marry the wrong person. Now, if each spouse marries the wrong person, think about generations. Think about hundreds of generations later that just totally got messed up by that one decision, 50 generations earlier. That's one decision. We're not talking about 70% into marriage, right? You can make it, you can say, what if a Jew marries the wrong spouse, he marries another Jew? That could also happen, right? But the repercussions of that, are absolutely catastrophic. That's why when I read the book Made in Heaven by Vari Kaplan about marriage when I first got engaged, so I never got past the introduction. Because I read the introduction, he says, this doesn't affect you. This decision affects your wife and your future kids and all your future generations. I'm like, who, me? And that was it. I shut the book. I was like, wow, that's pretty intense, even for me. But a person, makes that mistake. So now what happens? Is God has to make another tree. And now the person they were supposed to marry, there are all these other ramifications that fall like dominoes. And so now you have to really be hooked up to the matrix to see how everything fits in or doesn't fit in, who's going to go where and who's going to do this. And that changes everything. That's no different, in many ways than Adam and Eve eating from the tree, right? I mean, that's more significant. I think it's definitely more significant because, it brought death to the world. But a person can't think that the decision they make and what they do has no ramifications in the future, regardless of whether God knows what you're going to do or not. It doesn't matter. Because, according to that assumption, which we said before, if that's all true, then it doesn't matter what I do, right? I'll just, be plagued by these Freddy Krueger movies my whole life and, just have to keep going through the same dreams and going through the same thing.
Right.
But you have to do it. And when you do it, you're liable You have to take responsibility, regardless of whether God knows what you're going to do or not. It doesn't matter. God sees the beginning, the middle, and the end of the film strip. So wherever you fit in that film strip, ding, ding, wherever you fit in there, then regardless of whether God knows what you're going to do or not, there are going to have to be multiple ramifications if you do this or you do that. I do it, with the right intention, with the wrong intention, middle intention. All these different things get factored in. And then it spreads out into, physical ramifications, spiritual ramifications. I mean, you need like an unbelievable supercomputer, to keep everything intact. And we're only talking about one person. Now, what you do, doesn't just affect you. And affect, a person's married, affects their wife, affects their kids, decisions that they make. I mean, there are a million things, that go on, that are factored in over here. So at the end of the day, and this is something that certainly I know plenty of secular Jews don't want to hear, and that is, you got to take responsibility for what you do. You can't just say, well, it doesn't really matter what I do. You have no idea, what the ramifications are, right? One of the 13 principles of faith, that God knows the thoughts of man, that doesn't mean man is a robot, right? That's also a mistake. It doesn't mean man's a robot. It doesn't mean that, he just programmed DNA. He can make a right decision. He can make a wrong decision. God could lead him in a wrong direction because, for different reasons. That can also happen. But does that stop a person's free will? It doesn't stop it. It may limit it. It definitely may limit it. But, I think, make no mistake, as much free will as we think we have, if you really analyze what's going on, it's not so much. Right? The only question is how we're going to react to certain things, or what we're going to do, how we're going to utilize potential, not utilize potential, right? But at the end of the day, God is orchestrating, all these different things to get whatever He wants,
Right.
Out of the world. So,
well, let me ask you a question. Do you agree that if the case is that God does know every single sin that I'm ever going to commit, would you agree that I'm telling you the way I would think. If I knew that no matter what I did in the future, God knew I was going to choose that, it would actually take responsibility off of me, because I'm thinking, well, what's say in the matter that I have? Address it from that perspective.
What I'm saying is that's a cop-out, because you absolutely do have a say. It doesn't matter what God may know what you're going to do. But does he have this redneck gun pointing to your head and say, okay, let's see what he's going to do? No one's pointing a gun to anybody's head.
Use the term.
Why? Why is he pointing a gun to your head?
Use the term redneck a lot. I know you got to be talking about me. I'm just kidding.
No, but
I hear you.
Why is it? Why is it that someone will say that my free will is taken away?
Yeah.
Like I had somebody say, I had a college student many years ago, tell me, it's like, wow, you live this really secluded, really backward sort of, type of life with all these laws and everything else. And I'm living this carefree life and all this free will, blah, blah, blah. And you seem a lot happier than me. I go, I know, it kills you, doesn't it? So I said, what's the problem? I said, the problem is, yeah, you're given so much free will, you're taken by the tide of what goes on around you. Right? But you still have to act. You still have the free will. We can't say, well, God knows what I'm going to do and it doesn't matter. Of course it matters. Because if it didn't matter, then you're never liable for anything. Right? You keep Shabbos, you don't keep Shabbos, you curse somebody, you didn't curse somebody. What does it matter? God knows what you're going to do anyway. The only case, right, one of the only cases we have, is by Pharaoh. And why? And that God took away his free will. So that makes it even scarier. If you don't have free will, then why are you going to be punished? Right? Why in the world is the person, why in the world should Pharaoh be punished? And it says a number of times that God hardened his heart. But but it doesn't mean 100% his free will is taken away. He still had an opportunity, to do tshuva. It's just that, it's a lot more difficult, almost impossible for him to do it, right? Not totally impossible. You see that, who did Pharaoh become after he leaves Egypt? He became the king of Nineveh, right? If he's the king of Nineveh, if you read the book of Jonah, what happens when Jonah comes to the people of Nineveh? They all repent. The king's like, oh no, I know this God. I'm not going to mess with him. He did tshuva, right? It seems like the king of Nineveh, who was Pharaoh, actually did tshuva. So not totally out of the realm of possibility. But, if someone is put in that position, right, I'll make it even a little more difficult. I always have this question by Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Someone who, grows up as a secular Jew only comes to synagogue on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the worst time ever to come to synagogue. It's all about doom and gloom, right? It's all about death, who by fire, who by water, who by this, who by that. It doesn't come on Hanukkah, come on Purim, right? But I always wondered, what does God give these people? What does he give them? They're really going to grow spiritually, coming to synagogue for a few hours and this and that. So I heard a great rabbi once say that what does God give them? He gives them, during the year, he gives them more of what he gave them before. I'm like, well, that's no good. If he gives them more of, desire and this and that, then how is this person ever going to change? Right? That makes it much more difficult. If God just gives you all the desires you want, you have plenty of money, you don't need God, you don't pray, you don't do any of these other things, etc. There's no growth. There's no spiritual growth, right? So how does a person like that, how do they come back? How do they actually do tshuva, right? It's almost impossible for them to change. Does God say you can't change? No. Is it going to be hard to change if God gives you, more of all that? 100%. Is your free will taken away at this point? Not taken away, right? There have been people who have been in crazy situations, very bad situations where they've actually come back, regardless of what, has happened to them. So you see that there is a possibility. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy, right? But at the same time, the question, the question would be, well, that really looks like my free will is gone, that God has totally taken it away. And yeah, it definitely, it definitely looks like that. And I've seen, a lot of people over the years just keep doing the same things that they're doing, and they have no inkling about anything, not interested in change, not interested about tshuva, not repentance, not anything, right? So is it possible for them to come back? It's possible. Is it probable? All right, so I'm a pessimist, right? It's probably not, so probable. But you say, how can it be? How can it be someone can be so steeped in and still can get out of it? So you're looking at living proof, right? People look at my life and say, wow, I can see where you came from and where you ended up, but, no one else came along for the ride, right? So if no one else came along for the ride, but they were, I was in the same place as them, doesn't make me, such a great person. At the same time, as the Talmud says, the person wants to go in the right direction, God will help them. If they don't want to go in the right direction, God will not stop them. What does that mean? It means you have free will. And it doesn't matter what is sent your way, you still have free will to make the right choice. And if a person has that spark in his heart, right, and they want to make the right choice, it will come. The question is how long, where, what, when, right? That's a whole different discussion. But a person has to make the choice, and then they have to go out and try and do something, about it. But it's possible, right? It's not. I wouldn't say, I wouldn't say it's probable, right? But it's, it's definitely possible. It depends how bad a person. How bad a person, really wants it. So, my own case, I know plenty of people, they're still doing whatever they're doing. Are they ever going to change? I don't see it. I'm not going to say, it's impossible, but the more a person, is regulated in doing what they do, they don't think about anything. That's the problem.
Right.
They think about zero. The most important question is, do I put, ketchup or mustard on my hot dog? They're not interested in any, of any of this, but that's their own free choice. And they can't say after 120 years, well, God, you gave me so much of it, you didn't give me free choice. God's going to say, yeah, let me play back the video. I gave you all this free choice, and you took it for garbage.
Right.
You didn't use it for the right thing, so, You can't blame, you can't blame me, right? God says, yeah, I knew you were going to do that, but you still had the possibility, right? God's going to show you that other movie what your potential was. And he said you could have done this, but you chose not to. You disregarded all this information. You weren't interested. You were too steeped in. Well, God, you made the world, an unbelievable place where I got stuck. Okay, but that's, there's a 614th commandment. Don't be stupid. Don't get so sucked in that you can never, get out. Yeah, God made this world the way he did. There are checks and balances. Mm-hmm. You want to check in the proper way? 100%. Right? Even a little bit, you want help, God will be there. But he's not giving you the zap treatment if you don't, if you take the wrong path. Right? If you take the wrong path, that's your choice. And you're going to have to live, with that choice. Because otherwise, we'd be robots. Every time, you did something wrong and you get zapped, you wouldn't have free will.
Right.
But that, again, that free will with everything being said, and that's really the question. Is when we're put in all these different situations, etc., how much of it is really what I'm doing rather than in the bigger picture, all these other things being orchestrated at the same time. And that, I think, if you go through the book Derech Hashem and the way he discusses, the way the Ramchal discusses it, it's a mind-boggling thing. Without even getting into Kabbalistic aspects, you see that bottom line is there's a lot more that we see in this world we don't have any idea at all. What we're looking at, but still we are the greatest actors because God put us in this world to grow and to strive. And if we want to make the wrong decisions, we'll say, yeah, God made more than one God. He gave, look, he said, let us make man. Yeah. Let us go down and see what's going on. He gave us that choice, even to make the wrong choice.
Interesting. Well, I tell you, it's definitely an interesting topic. I think it's probably one that's like a never ending. So I think for me, what I take out of this whole thing is at the end of the day, we know that God is a righteous judge and he's not going to misjudge us in any way. So that's what we got to trust in. So, but Rabbi, thank you, man. It's been fun. I was going to say it's been a blast, but it's been funner. If I was a little bit better, feeling better, I could get in here and be a little more ornery for you. But
we got next week for that. We'll give you a week to cover that.
Yeah. God willing, that'll be good, man. Okay. Well, shalom, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Same time, same place with Rabbi Coffman. If you have any ideas for hot topics, send them to Rabbi Coffman so he can actually do it if you don't. I get so many messages.
Yeah, so you can blow up my system. You can send
yeah. So message Rabbi Coffman on your ideas for hot topic shows, and then and we'll coordinate and we'll pick one and we'll kind of go from there. So. So until next time, shalom everybody. It's good to see y'all. Thank you all for your participation in the YouTube chat as well, and for being kind and cordial to each other. So y'all have a great week. Shavua Tov, and happy American New Year, if you will. Fireworks probably going to be going off.
Brother.
Yeah, peace.
It's already New Year for me.
Yeah. Right. I see you celebrating with your big bottle of Coca-Cola.
You better believe it.
Oh,
man. Believe it. We're still going strong.
That's funny. Okay, shalom everybody. Take care.
All right, shalom.
חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד איפוק זו העוצמה ויתור זו הגדולה השאיפה והכמיהה חושבים דוברים לובשים בכל האופנים זה טבעם של אנשים שונים נזכור בסוף כולנו שותפים חשוב תמיד להיות אנושיים לובשים בכל האופנים זה טבעם של אנשים שונים נזכור בסוף